NetsBoy, so let's hear what he has to say. His name is NetsBoy, he thinks the world is all over when the Nets just can't play. What up, Net fans? NetsBoy here, bring your latest in your Brooklyn Nets news. All right, let's dive right in. We've got a bit to talk about in this episode. It's been a while. I was going to do an episode right after the regular season came to an end, but I thought to myself, why don't I wait until after the play-in tournament so we can see who the Nets' opponent will be, because the Nets indeed clinched the 2 seed and took care of business down the stretch. So, and as we know, now the Nets' opponent will be the Boston Celtics. But before we talk about that, let's just reflect on the regular season real fast as a whole, because we might as well. The Nets did what they needed to do down the stretch and won, I believe, 3 of their last 4 games and 4 of their last 5, including playing Kevin Durant on back-to-backs, which was a shocker, and just winning the games they needed to clinch that 2 seed. They went 48-24. I predicted them going 45-50 this season, which I think is, the first time I've pretty much nailed exactly what I thought the Nets record would be. Granted, I did make that prediction before the James Harden trade, so I don't know how much credit I really should be getting. But 48-24, the 2 seed in the East, very pleased with that. I think if you look at the season as a whole, despite the injuries, despite the ups and downs, despite me flipping out on a regular basis on Steve Nash and DeAndre Jordan and all this other stuff, I would have to say this has been a very successful regular season, don't you think? I mean, the Nets are exactly where they want to be. A top 2 seed and relatively healthy and going into the playoffs. So overall, it's a success. And we did get a chance to kind of see the big 3 in action one more time against the Bulls game. They didn't play that great, the 3 of them. Kyrie had a decent game. Kevin Durant was just garbage. But overall, though, the other guys played well. Jeff Green played well in that game. Blake Griffin had a solid game. And the Nets managed to win. And that's great to see, because it's really encouraging to see this Nets team win when the big 3 had average games, which, granted, it was against the Bulls. It still was a very good win overall, and it was just good to see. But then, of course, Kyrie Irving had the face injury, so he didn't play at the next game, so we didn't get to see the 3 of them at that point. And then the game after that, they rested James Harden, because, if you're going to rest Kevin Durant, and then, if you're no longer going to rest Kevin Durant, you got to rest somebody in a back-to-back, so why not James Harden? Because, that's Nets logic. But overall, like I said, very successful end of the season, very successful regular season overall, and now we get to look forward to seeing the Nets play the Boston Celtics in the first round of the playoffs. Now, let's start and talk right about that immediately and what we expect from this series. The Boston Celtics have been a team this year that have had moments of looking amazing and then moments of looking terrible. Led the way, obviously, by Jason Tatum, who is an all-star. He's a borderline superstar, unbelievably skilled player. He scored 50 points in the play-in game against the Wizards, so he can ball out. And, he is going to be a handful, and he always has been a handful for the Nets. The good news is I'm pretty sure the Nets should be able to counter him with Kevin Durant in on himself. And then you go beyond Jason Tatum with the injury to Jaylen Brown, and he won't be playing in the playoffs. The offense that the Celtics have is very limited. It really consists of Jason Tatum, Kemba Walker, who's been inconsistent this year, and then I guess Evan Fournier is probably the next best offensive player they've got. They're really not a strong offensive team, which is part of the reason why the Celtics have been as inconsistent as they have. Because if they're not going to beat you with their defense, which has been average this season also, they're not going to be able to compete and outscore you. So this kind of is set up, in my opinion, to be a pretty favorable matchup for the Nets. And I don't want to say it's going to be a sweep, because I really don't necessarily believe in sweeps, even though the Nets got swept last year in the first round of the playoffs. I am a firm believer that usually in the playoffs, the intensity and the adrenaline and the talent level is so high that usually at some point the underdog team pulls off a win, at least one. I do believe that. So I am going to say going into this series that this is going to be a 5-game series, and the Nets will win in 5. Just because, once again, the Nets are still trying to figure out a full rotation with the big three and everyone relatively healthy. And like I said, going into this game, Joe Harris is the only real question mark. And I think they expect him to be basically 100% since they rested him the last couple games of the season with that hip injury. I haven't heard anything about him being out, expected to miss any time. So once he's back, the Nets are going to be healthy. You know, other than obviously Dinwiddie and Chris Chiozza, which we already knew, everyone else is healthy. So because of that and because the Celtics don't have Jaylen Brown, I think a sweep is certainly a possibility, but I'm still going to say 5 games because I never like to sleep on a talented team, or in this case, a talented player like Jason Tatum who can go off and give you 50 on any given night. But to me, the key for this Nets series is just figuring out the rotation. As terrible as that sounds, and I don't want to dismiss the Celtics as an opponent, the reality is that the main goal for the Nets obviously is to win the series. But the secondary goal for this Nets team is to figure out this rotation with the big three. Who are the Nets going to go with? We saw the Nets completely remove DeAndre Jordan from the rotation, and I don't have a problem with that. We see them starting Blake Griffin at the 5, Claxton coming off the bench. Don't have a problem with that. The question is, how deep are the Nets going to go in their rotation? Usually in the playoffs, teams play a 9, sometimes 8-man rotation because they want to play the best of the best. Well, if the Nets go to a 9-man rotation, the question is, who's not playing? Because we already know the big three are going to be playing: Harden, Kyrie, and Kevin Durant. We know Blake Griffin's going to play, and we know Joe Harris is going to play. That should be the starting lineup. And then we know Jeff Green's going to play. We know Nicholas Claxton's going to play. And then who are the other 2 guys going to be, right? I'm assuming we're going to see Landry Shamet, and I'm assuming we're going to see Bruce Brown. I'm pretty sure that's going to be the rotation. I'm sure we're definitely going to see Bruce Brown, to be honest. And so I guess that 9th spot in the rotation would be between Landry Shamet and Tyler Johnson. And I'm guessing it's probably going to be Landry Shamet to start. I think that makes the most sense. I do like Tyler Johnson, but I think Shamet kind of fits with the team more, being more of a shooter, though. I mean, Shamet went through another one of these stretches these last couple games, right? He was went through like a 1-for-9 game, and then all of a sudden was like 6 for 8. I don't get that guy. He's another all or nothing guy. He's another Torian Prince type of player. But Alan Crabb, back in my top 10 most hated Nets, remember that. That was my 200th episode. Go check that out if you haven't seen it. It seems like he's one of those guys where he's going to be all or nothing, but I think he deserves to be in the rotation to start. And so that's the rotation I would have. Those are the 9 players I would play. If I was going to go to a 10th player, I would go with Tyler Johnson. But I will say this. I would love to see Alize Johnson play regular minutes because of his rebounding ability. We know the Nets sometimes struggle to get the rebound. And not that I expect Steve Nash to have the wherewithal or the common sense to be like, we're not the best defensive rebounding team. Let me put my best defensive rebounder in because we already don't see any DeAndre Jordan. I don't think Alize Johnson will be in the rotation, but I really think he should. But then again, who is he getting taken out of the rotation? And that's part of the problem. There's really, of those 9 players I mentioned, the only one you could justify is Landry Shamet, in my opinion, but then that doesn't really fit because Shamet's a guard and Alize Johnson's more of a forward / power, small forward, power forward. So it's not going to happen. I would find a way to get to Alize Johnson to play about 15 minutes a game, just provide energy and really good defensive rebounding, but Steve Nash won't do it. I'm hoping that Steve Nash will make adjustments, and if there is a situation where the Celtics or anyone in the postseason is dominating the Nets on the board, that he will go to Alize Johnson to provide energy and rebounding. But I think the rotation is what I said before earlier with Brown and Shamet and Jeff Green and Claxton coming off the bench with the big 3, Joe Harris and Blake Griffin. I think that makes the most sense. I think as long as everyone stays healthy, this should be a very simple series for the Nets. I will say I expect it to be competitive. I don't expect these games to be a blowout. I think the Celtics are going to be in every single game. I think they're going to play hard. And like I said, I think they might actually steal a game. But I just don't see this going beyond 5 games. And like I said, the secondary goal of this Nets series, this first round series, is to figure out this rotation and consider getting the the chemistry going with the big three and everyone else. So that's what I really expect moving forward. To me, the biggest key to the Nets, other than figuring it out with the rotation and figuring out with the with the chemistry, is just what's going to happen with the other guys. I touched upon it before with that Bulls game. It was great to see that the other guys were involved. To me, I'm a little afraid that at some point there'll be a little bit too much hero ball from Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. Not as much James Harden anymore, because James Harden seems like his main focus is to get the rest of the guys involved. But like we saw it down the stretch in the games where the Nets were losing when James Harden was out and Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant were healthy. Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving are just such gifted scorers and such gifted players that sometimes they just try to take control of the game. And though they're making their shots, 6 out of 10 times or 7 out of 10 times, the rest of the guys are not getting involved. And that's not a good way to play basketball. And I feel like it's part of the reason why the Nets, with just Durant and Kyrie, were a 500 team this year. Because they were. And yet when they had James Harden playing, they were like 25 and like 7 or something like that. Like, I don't think it was a coincidence that the Nets need James Harden. And it's crazy to think because Kyrie and KD are such amazing players and such fantastic superstar scorers. But that's the reality of it. And think hard about watching the Nets play when it was Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. How when things weren't going well with the Nets, they just simply would just play hero ball. And they go isolation one-on-one. And Kyrie will go 1-on-5 dribbling through everyone and scoring. Or Kevin Durant will take these tough contested shots. So I can't believe I'm saying this, especially with how much I yelled at him back in the day. The Nets need James Harden. And James Harden to me is the key to the Nets in this playoffs because he gets everyone else involved. He makes everyone else around them better. And that's not to say Kyrie or KD can't do that. It's just that James Harden is a much better facilitator and much better at getting all the other guys involved. The Claxtons, the Bruce Browns, the Joe Harrises, the Jeff Greens, the Blake Griffins, the Shamits, those guys, for those guys to be involved in the offense, they need James Harden to facilitate. So I can't believe I'm saying it, but James Harden to me is the key to the playoffs. Without James Harden, I don't know if this Nets team is going to make a deep run or not because he makes everyone else better. But that's just my opinion. Before we wrap up this episode, I do want to, of course, talk about the amazing play of the year that the Nets had in the final game of the regular season. The, tip by Mike James, which, by the way, I guess Mike James won't be in the rotation either, right? He's someone else you could argue that could be in there with Tyler Johnson the way he's been playing, but I have a feeling he's going to be probably the guy not in the rotation either. I mean, Nets got depth if you think about it, which is great. The Mike James tipped the ball to Blake Griffin with the crazy behind-the-back pass to Kyrie, who then passed it ahead to Mike James again, who threw it off the backboard to Kevin Durant. That play was awesome. Just wanted to say how awesome that play was. I saw that play, and I was in disbelief. I had to rewind it and watch like 4 or 5 times. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I highly recommend you look it up. I'm being shocked because I'm pretty sure it's been all over SportsCenter. It's been all over social media and stuff. But I highly recommend that you check out that play. It was just awesome. And it was great to see. And to me, it was just a great way for the Nets to end the regular season with a great win like they had against the Cavs, as well as a great play of the year, which was just awesome. But yeah, so there you have it. So that's it on this episode. I discussed what I wanted to discuss. I talked about the end of the wrap-up season. We talked about the Celtics-Nets series. Let me know what you guys think. If you guys agree with me that the Nets should win in 5, if you think maybe the Nets should sweep them, if you somehow think that there should be a 6-game series, I don't know anyone who's really thinking that, except for delusional Celtics fans. But then again, these are the same Celtic fans who probably still blame Kyrie Irving for everything because that's all Celtic fans do. Let me know what you guys think about that, about the whole regular season, about if you agree with me in the sense that maybe the Nets should consider playing Alize Johnson, but probably won't. If you agree with my idea of the rotation of who we're going to probably see play, and just, let me know what you guys think. So until the next NetsBoy episode, which will probably be after Game 2, that tends to be what I do. I usually do an episode after the second game and then after the 4th game and then so on and so forth. So the next NetsBoy will probably be after Game 2. of the first round of the playoffs. Until then, let me know what you guys think. I'm excited about the postseason. I hope you are. And until next time, this is NetsBoy getting ready and excited and signing off.